Okay, so I just want to share my testimony about how Jesus brought me back to life. I wrote about it. I titled it The Back to Life Incident. Okay, so I'll start off by letting you know that I was abused sexually when I was very young, and then psychologically pretty bad by my mother, who was narcissistic. Not to throw it around lightly, but she really did have the NPD thing going on. I remember when I was very young, she and my uncle, who she let abuse me as well. I remember them talking in the kitchen, and I was in the bedroom. And my uncle said to my mom, "She's going to remember." And my mom said, "No, she's not." And my uncle said, "Yeah, she's going to remember." And my mom said, "Well, if she does, I'll just say she's crazy." So just keep that in mind. She treated me really bad. Like, I guess she didn't want a girl. So I was kind of her trash, and she just sort of felt like I wasn't worthy of not being abused, I guess. There were just a lot of other different incidences that I could mention, but the bottom line is it really hurt me, like right from the beginning. So as a teenager, she had younger boyfriends than herself, so they were not very much older than I was. So she was very jealous of me as well, and that hurt too, because that was my mom, and she was just the person that I thought I was supposed to be able to trust. And she liked to gossip too. That was her main thing. She loved to gossip, and she really loved to stab me in the back. I've caught her many times, and whatever. So it just really hurts when your own parent does that to you. My dad was out of the picture. He left when we were young. He found a rubber in the garbage can in the bathroom. And it was right after my uncle left the house. So he accused her of having sex with her brother, which I don't doubt, but for that reason she divorced him. So this left me, back in that day I had to stay with my mom. So he left me with this monster who hated me, and everything was done behind closed doors. So I didn't know who to tell, and I really didn't understand what to tell. So anyway, I grew up, and because of these scars, I was just led astray very easily. And I ended up with boyfriends one of which was a drug dealer, so I got hooked on ecstasy. And then trying to get off from one drug, I would go on to something else, and I kind of just didn't care. I wanted to kill myself. I had seriously thought about it many times. And I thought, well, if I can't kill myself, maybe I'll just party, being I like drugs. So this is my way of escaping life without actually escaping life. So I ended up hanging out with some friends who were shooting up heroin, and I was at their house. This was the night before it happened that I died. So the drug dealer came over to bring some more heroin, And I ended up taking off with the drug dealer. It turned out that he had like guns and other drugs. He was making crack runs. He was smoking crack while he was driving, and he was more ruthless than I was. Let's just say that. It was getting to the point I was getting scared he was going to do something. He just, I don't know, just something occurred to me that he might want to kill me. I was just getting bad vibes from him. So at this point, we were in a motel room. He had me carrying the guns. We did some more heroin in the motel room, and then he left to go on another drug run. And at this point, I got this really strong feeling like I need to leave, because I just felt like that when he came back, he was going to do something. So I took off walking. I was about 12 miles from where I lived on the beach. So I was 12 miles inland. So I took off walking. I was going over one of the first major bridges, and this guy who I knew from the club where I worked stopped, and he picked me up. I figured I'd just, get a ride back to the beach with him. And he was not the type of person that I really liked. He was money orientated, and everything was about status and what you owned and blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't like that ever. And his personality kind of depressed me, So he talked me into going to his house, and I agreed. I didn't want to go there. I wanted to go home, but I agreed. So we went there. We did some more drugs, just like cocaine or whatever. And then we fell asleep, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was very depressed. I was thinking, this is the reason, personalities like him, this is the reason why I don't want to live. Like, I can't stand these people. And I just I was so broken inside. I didn't have the strength to realize that I could stand up to these people. I didn't have to be around them. Like, it wore me down. So anyway, I got this idea that I was going to just kill myself. I was done. And at that point, I heard two angels. They were telling me, don't do this, don't do this. And I paused for a minute, like I was going to listen to them, and then I just said, no, I'm just going to do it. I'm tired of dealing with this stuff. So I had an economy-sized bottle of Tylenol PM in my bag that I had just bought. And I went and sat on the kitchen floor, opened the bottle, and started swallowing the bottle. I mean, few pills at a time. And I heard the voices from the angels behind me, and one said to the other one, she's going to do it this time. She's going to do it this time. We had better go get him. So after I swallowed the whole bottle, I'm embarrassed to say that I even did that now, looking back, but I went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, or maybe a few hours later or whatever, and went to the bathroom. I didn't really make it to the bathroom. I passed out. Then the guy whose house I was at, he woke up, and he came in the bathroom, and he started yelling at me because I was passed out on the floor. So he had to get ready for work. He was angry with me, very angry by the way I was acting. I was like half in, half out of it. I could barely walk. He was ready. He said, come on, let's go. I'll take you home. And okay, so he lived on the beach in a house that was a 2-story house, and his living room part was on stilts. So the whole front part of the house was, or it was his living room, was all window looking over the beach. And there was a spirit there in his living room, and I thought it was a person, and the spirit was saying, come over here, the door's over here. And I just started walking toward the glass, and the guy started yelling at me. He said, what are you doing? If you go through that glass, you could kill yourself. And right then I realized it was just window. So I came back. So my point is, this thing was trying to get me to die right then and there. I don't know how I made it down the stairs. The guy was angry. He didn't want to help me. We drove to the sister town where I lived. Wasn't very far, really. And I wanted my mom. And I had him drop me off at this apartment where she used to live, but she had moved back to her home state a few months prior to when this happened. So he dropped me off, and I went and knocked on the door, and no one was there. And I'm like, well, my mom's always home in the morning. And then I saw no one was in the apartment, and then I finally remembered, oh yeah, she's not there anymore. So I guess my point is, here I am once again, just I guess wanting my mom, and she's not there. So through the whole life, psychologically she wasn't there. She was always playing fucking head games, I guess, and whatever. So I get back in the vehicle. I had him drive me back over like about 10 blocks to where my apartment was, and I had him drop me off down the street because I didn't want him to know where I lived. So I went up the stairs. Well, while I was walking toward my apartment, I was kind of half bent over walking, and I was thinking, how am I walking right now? Like, I just knew I was way, way too far out of it. And I realized the angels that I heard earlier, there was one on either side of me, and they were actually helping me walk to the apartment. So I went up the stairs, I went in the door, and I left the door wide open, and I fell down on the floor in the living room, and that is where I died. Okay, so there was one point that I remember. I was sitting on the couch in the living room. Jesus was there. I don't remember seeing him at this point, and then my body was on the floor. But Jesus asked me, why did you do this? And, just to, I guess, push the issue, but I just said, I'll never be able to get over what my mom did to me. And then there was a blackout, sort of, and the next thing I remember was I heard Jesus's voice. I knew it was God. I didn't really understand it was Jesus at this point, but he said, get up and kneel and pray before me. So I could only see black, and my body was so cold, and I couldn't move. It was ice cold. It felt ice cold. So I couldn't move, and I'm like thinking, how am I going to get up and kneel and pray before him? I can't move. So then he said it again stricter, get up and kneel and pray before me. And I still couldn't see, although it wasn't like total blackness. I could feel that I wasn't cold anymore. The cold just went away, and I could feel, movement in my muscles. And then he said it again, get up and kneel and pray before me. Very strict. And I was thinking, I gotta get up. I'm gonna get in trouble if I don't. And I was kind of like wondering, how does he expect me to get up? So I felt my muscles move, and I moved my arms and I pushed myself up. Oh, well, before I did this, I realized my eyes were open the whole time, and that I could not, it was just that I couldn't see. It wasn't that my eyes were closed. And then I saw the sun rays coming in through the kitchen window, shining into the living room, and I saw them push the darkness out, and I saw them hit the tile in front of my face. And I was like, wow, I really was blind. And so then I felt my muscles move, and I pushed myself up, and I was sort of on my hands and knees, and then I sat up on my knees, and I was thinking, I gotta kneel and pray before him. That's what he told me to do. So I got up, and I saw the door was wide open, and I was thinking, well, before I do this, I'm going to shut the door, because I'll look like an idiot kneeling and praying before something that they can't see if someone walks in. So I got up, went to the door, and then I was debating whether I should lock it or not. And I think I locked it, and then I unlocked it just in case someone wanted to come in, like one of the kids or neighbor kids or whatever. I'm not sure. I don't remember that part, whether I actually locked it or not. I don't think I did. So, and in that process, I totally forgot what Jesus told me to do. And the point of that situation that I learned is, when you are focused on worrying about what other people think of you, you're going to lose sight of what the Lord wants or what the Lord told you to do. So just, something I learned. So I started walking toward the bedroom. I was thinking, I'll just go sleep this off. And I was just about to leave the living room. I was walking through this threshold, that was into the hallway. And right as I was leaving the living room, I heard him, and he said, I can't believe you're walking away from me after what I just did for you. And it was like his voice said, I can't believe you're walking away from me. And then his thoughts, the implication was, after what I just did for you. So I stopped right there, and I held the sides of the wall, the threshold, and I was like, oh my God, Jesus is really in my living room. And then I'm going through this process. Whatever I'm thinking, he knows. He knows everything. He reads my mind. So I was telling myself, don't think anything, vulgar or anything that will, offend him or whatever. And then I was just like, I can't believe you're in my living room. And then he said, go sit on the bed. The Spirit has work to do. So I continued on into my bedroom, which was just around the corner. And where I sat on the bed, I was facing the living room where he was. I could see right through the wall. So then I went through this little process of I looked with my physical eyes and I could only see the wall. But when I looked down, I could see my spirit eye, could see him. And then I saw that he was coming down and he was standing sort of in a beam of light. And over his left shoulder up into heaven, I could see, or I couldn't see the Father, but I knew the Father was there. And they were in, in harmony. They were in communication. And okay, so I'm sitting there and I wanted to get up. I wanted to do something. I wanted to clean or do something. And then he said, sit still. The Spirit has work to do. You have to sit still. So I'm sitting still, waiting, and then I noticed cigarettes and a lighter and an ashtray were on the nightstand next to the bed. So I figured, well, if being I have to sit still, I guess I'll light up a cigarette. So I grabbed a cigarette and lit it up. It took one drag, and he folded his arms and shook his head no. And he was angry with me, and he grabbed my hand, like I could feel the Spirit grab my hand and smash the cigarette out in the ashtray. And it was like my fingers were almost touching the hots. He was making my hand smash it out really hard. And I was thinking, I'm going to burn myself. And I remember that at that point, he was just like, his thoughts were, I don't care if she burns herself. Like, she's lucky it will only be the hots, Like, she has no idea what... I had no idea I was facing hell at that time. Totally oblivious, but... So he put the hots out, and then I was worried about the hots still burning in the ashtray, and he said, don't worry about the hots, they'll go out. And then, so I sat there, and then he started staring at me, and he said, or his telepathy or his spirit, was saying, you took your own life, and for that I could condemn you, but I won't. Instead, I have plans for you. And then he said something else, and I didn't understand what he was saying word for word, but I understood that he was actually saying what his plans were for me. Okay, so then I saw this ball, like a great big ball. I mean, it was humongous. It wasn't like a beach ball. It was humongous, circular ball of energy, intense energy. And it came down through the beam of light from the Father. It went through Jesus and then came around, and it was over my left shoulder. It was about 4 or 5 feet above my left shoulder, and it was just there radiating energy. And I knew that was the Spirit, and she was like talking to Jesus, and she was kind of like, her presence was in that path between Jesus and where she was above me. And she was observing me, and she said she doesn't even know what's going on. And she looked at Jesus like she's in big trouble, She doesn't even know what's going on. And she looked at Jesus as in, you're the one who you're the only one who's able to give mercy at this time. And Jesus just said, she will. So she was like back into her full, radiating energy looking at me. And then Jesus started looking into me. Like, I'm not sure if this was before or after the Holy Spirit energy came into the room or whatever, but he was looking into me and observing me, like my outer self, how I appeared to other people and whatever, my surface. And then he went in another layer and another layer, and it was like he saw me completely naked. I felt embarrassed. I had breast implants, and he let me know it was wrong to do that. I worked at a club, so I had gotten breast implants because I knew I would make more money if I had big boobs at the club. So he asked me why I did this, and I said, well, they used to sag. I had babies and I breastfed, and I really hated them sagging. So that was basically the truth. And he stopped for a minute. He was consulting with heaven, and he said, I have new boobs for you and they'll never sag. And then he looked into me more, and he was seeing my nakedness, and there were other parts of my body that I didn't like, and I didn't want him to see me. And he was there. He didn't judge me. He just knew. He knew how I felt about myself. The truth was that I felt, I was a slut. I did whatever, and he knew that I could see that I had trashed myself. He kept going in and in, and then that part was finished. And then this was when the Holy Spirit was there, and then after she was there, she started going in. She went in through like the top of my left shoulder and neck area, and she went into my body. I saw her go in, and then I could start seeing sort of through her perspective, and I saw into my soul, and in our souls is like this well. I mean, it is a well that looks like this small little hole, but inside, underneath, it is so vast. I mean, it is of eternity, basically. And it's eternal, and I saw her go in, and there was some light. It was like to the right part of my well or my soul, and to the left there was a lot of darkness. And I saw her go in and start cleaning things, and then at one point I couldn't see everything she was doing. I just knew I had to stay there and wait for her to finish her work. And then she was working, sorting out all this darkness and whatever. And at one point then she was like way down to the left, and she was way down in there, and she looked back up at me, and she said, now, do you want to go home at this point, or do you want me to finish everything? And I said, please don't leave anything undone. Please make sure your holy light and that is in, and that you have cleaned up every tiniest last part. Please don't leave anything undone. I want to be as close to Jesus as I can. So I understood that anything left undone would put us at a distance from the Lord in eternity. And I believe that somewhere in the scripture, I tried to find it later, but I know I have read it, and I had bookmarked it years ago. it says that for those who are saved and make it to heaven, if they refuse to continue to repent from or don't clean up these certain areas in their life that God has called them to clean up, they'll still be saved, but they will suffer a loss in eternity. I know that is there. I have to find it. Also, as far as the Holy Spirit having a woman's voice, I do know that there are indoctrinated people out there who just think, oh, if anything has a woman's voice, I heard that it's got to be satanic. And that is nowhere in the scripture. I'm sorry. Just because Jezebel is a feminine spirit, it means nothing. Okay, so honestly, if you look in Genesis, I think it's chapter 1, verse 27, the Lord says, let us create man in our image, both male and female, let us create him. Okay, so it says it right there. We are created in God's image, which is both male and female. Okay. Also, if you look in Proverbs through the first 10 chapters, I believe it could be more, it is talking as the Spirit. She says, I am wisdom, take her, she will prepare a table for you. And it goes on, she was there. She said, I was there with you when you created the firmament, and it just goes on. It was as feminine nature, and she was there, and she helped the Lord in creation. So, that's all I need to say. The argument isn't with me. It wasn't a satanic voice. It was an intense energy from God that came down, went through Jesus, and went into me and did her work, just as Jesus said the Spirit has work to do. So that was the Spirit, and she had a woman's voice. Also, I'm not saying that it is always going to come as a woman. Sometimes the Spirit manifests as Jesus, obviously we all know that. So God doesn't fit in our little boxes that some of us have. So please, pray about this and reach out to the Lord. Okay, that's all I got to say about that. So she came out. When she was finished, she came out. I saw her leave just the same way, and then she was back in her position above me to the left. I'm kind of like, it happened a long time ago. It was about 25 years ago. So we sat there. I was meditating on Jesus. I was just staring at him, and I don't know, it was just a moment of quietness, I guess, but just residing in his presence. And then I saw like the Spirit, or that intense energy, sort of dissipated a little bit, but she was still there. And I said, can I please come out into the living room where you are? And he said yes. Okay, so I forgot, before I asked him if I could go into the living room where he was, at one point he said, he explained to me, he said, this is not your life. You cannot just do whatever you want with your life and your body. You belong to me. And I guess I didn't understand it like I understood him, but it didn't really sink in to the point that I understand it now. But he explained to me, you are accountable for what you do in your life to me. Okay, so he said yes. I got up. I went into the living room. I saw the Father and him were talking. The Father was telling him something, but I couldn't hear what. And Jesus was really happy. So the Father was telling him something that I would do and something that would happen through me. And I knew it was something to do with the last days, with just before his return. And Jesus was very happy, and he is very excited about coming back and receiving his bride. So he asked the Father if he could enter me, and the Father, he was like saying, can I? And the Father gave him permission, and then I saw like his spirit come and he entered into my soul, and it was as though he was making love to me. That's just the most truthful way that I can put it. And then as he was leaving, like going back into where he was standing in the beam of light, I remember it went back into my regular earthly thought processes as he was leaving, and it's like the truth. Wherever he is, it'll bring the truth to the surface. And then I was thinking, I feel like I'm on ecstasy, like a drug. And then he pulled back, and basically he was letting me, or not letting me, but it was revealed that my thought processes were still very dirty, and everything was compared to being on a substance, I guess. Let's see, after that, then after that I said, okay, well, I gotta get up and kneel and pray before him like he told me. So, but I felt like my worldly thought processes were keeping me from actually doing it. So I was thinking to myself, well, I don't know if I feel really silly doing this, and maybe I'll just go get on my hands and knees in front of the television in the council, and I'll just start cleaning up where the DVDs are, and under, clean the shelves under the TV. And I was thinking, yeah, okay, that'll be my excuse for being on my knees. So at least I'm at one point. And I went over to the TV. I was dusting, and then Satan came to me. He was like in front of me, like where I was kneeling. Jesus was to my left, still standing there, where he had initially was standing, which would have been at my feet where I had died. So he was there, and then Satan came to me like in front of me to my right, and he said, well, just tell Jesus no, that you're not going to kneel and pray before him. And I was like, okay, wasn't even thinking of that being an option, but I was just like, what? And I kind of like my thoughts, my attention went to Jesus, and he said, if you tell me no, you will go to hell. I will have to send you to hell. And it's still, things didn't register on a deep level at that time. Like, I understood what he was saying, but the thought of hell and what all that entailed did not occur to me at that time. And then Satan said, well, just tell him no and see what happens. And he knew that I was a person that always wanted to try something new just to see what it was like, the curiosity part. So he used that, and he said, just tell him no, see what happens. And then I looked up at Jesus, and he was just looking like, I already told you what's going to happen. Still didn't really register. And then I just looked down, and I said to Satan, I didn't look at Satan, I just looked down, and I said, I will never tell Jesus no. And at that second, Satan just was like gone. He just wasn't there. And later, a few minutes later, or moments later, I realized he went to the opposite side of the living room, and he was crouched in the corner. So, looking back at this, I realized Satan, he didn't really have to leave the living room, because there were many parts of my life that Satan had dominion still over. It wasn't worked through the redemption process. I hadn't been sanctified. I needed yet to be sanctified and redeemed through life's processes for him to actually be expelled from everything, which would give him then no right to be in my living room. There was something I was going to say. Oh, yeah. During the time when he was looking into me and going in layer by layer, when we came to the naked part, Satan had already been there. I just didn't realize it yet. He looked at Satan, who was crouched in that same spot in the living room, and when Jesus was seeing how my thought processes were molded to be because of this life, Jesus looked at Satan, and not really looked at him, but he was like, what did you do to her? He just saw how messed up I was. And Satan just put his hand to his mouth and started laughing. Just wanted to mention that because I forgot to mention that. Okay, so let me see what happened after that. So Satan left. I did kneel, and I bowed my head, and I meditated on him. So apparently that was satisfactory to Jesus, I was praying before him. I don't want to miss anything, but I guess I'll just have to bring it up later if I do. Then Jesus said, now I want you to do what you need to do. Do whatever you need to do to straighten up. And I want you to tell people about me. And I want, do what you need to do to walk right with me. Get your life in order. So I knew right then that I would have to pack a bag and go to the hospital. I knew I had to go to rehab. So I went back and sat on the couch where I had been, or where I was, and I was thinking, I gotta pack my bag, and I really don't want to leave the living room because his spirit's here, and I just don't want to leave him. So I sat there for a while. I did some things around the apartment, and every time his presence and his spirit was still there, so thick in the living room. It was just amazing. I did not want to leave that living room because his presence was there. Okay, so I guess I'll just bring up this little part. Before I actually packed my bag and left the living room, left the house, there was a part before this all happened. My daughter Audrey, so my son had moved up to live with my mom at this point. He was getting into a lot of trouble, so he just decided to go and stay with his grandma up where she moved to. So he wasn't there. My daughter was there. We were very close. we always hung out together. And the night before it happened, I had called her before or right after work, and I said, look, I'm going to go hang out with my friends, and these are the people that were shooting up. And I said, so I'll be home in the morning. And so she knew not to worry about me, I'd be home. And I did this actually more often than one time is too often as far as I'm concerned now, but I did it often. But yeah, and I really did not like myself for it. So Audrey wanted to stay home, and she said she told me later she had a very bad feeling that something was going to happen to me, and she wanted to stay home. She was waiting there for me to show up in the morning. And she had her own bedroom, but we always slept in my bedroom. She's just slept in the bed with me because we always talked before we went to sleep. And we were just always together. So then she said that her best friend at the time, Rory, came over and was like, well, we're going to go camping and do this and that. I guess they had drugs or whatever. And I think the kids were rolling at that time. There was ecstasy like everywhere in that town, in that area. So Rory was a little bit older than her, so my kids were always pretty open about what they had done. They knew they wouldn't get in trouble. They knew they didn't have to hide it from me. So anyway, Rory was like, come on with us. I don't know if it was ecstasy or acid or what they were doing, but they were going to go camping and do something. And Audrey was so reluctant to leave. She's like, I don't want to leave. I just want to stay home. So Rory got her to leave. And in hindsight, I see that it had to be that way because it was in the Lord's plan. Okay, so I packed a bag and I went around the corner on the same block. There was a neighbor that I knew. His name was Dan. I asked Dan, please take me to the hospital, and I told him what happened, and he believed me. He didn't understand it, but he believed me. He said something definitely happened to you. I guess he could tell, but he took me to the hospital. The doctor, they took a blood test first thing because I went in there saying I overdosed and I need to go to rehab. So they did a blood test, and the doctor came back, and he actually sat on my bed on my right side, and he said, look, in school, before we were finished, our class was told that each one of us was going to have at least one miracle case that we absolutely could not explain. And he was just staring at me, and he said, I guess you're mine. And he said, you should not be alive right now. You are way, way past the limit, over the chart. And he said, let alone you said this happened yesterday. So, even time has passed, and, your body eliminates as time goes on. So he said, let alone this happened yesterday, even today, you should not be alive right now. And then I was thinking that I remembered that Jesus said, tell people about me. So I just said, I saw Jesus. And he was just staring at me. Later, he left the room, and then he came back, and he believed me. And I think he was just in awe. So he just kind of scolded me when he came back in the room. He said, if you're gonna kill yourself, you don't want to die of liver failure. He said, this stuff he said, I don't know about the damage you've done, but you know, liver failure is very, it's a hard thing to die from. Like, it's very uncomfortable. You itch, and I don't know. He was just saying you don't want to die from that. Yeah, I wouldn't want to, looking back, I wouldn't want to do that anyway. And later in life, I was told if I do ever try to commit suicide again, he said, Jesus told me that I won't make it. Of course, you know, after what he did for me. So I went into rehab, and basically I didn't completely straighten up. You know, it took me a while for things to register, which I'll put on another video. But I never shot up again. Well, actually, I can't say that. It's something that happened later in years, but there was a reason for it. I understand that now. But yeah, every time I tried to get high on something around that time, I just did not feel. I just felt dirty, and the buzz was not the same. It just was not enjoyable. So this is the end of this video. I'm going to try to post some pictures that I have, if I can find them, and get them on this video. Pictures that I drew of describing or showing where he stood and where I was laying and all that. But if not, this is the end of this video. All right, bye.